Welcome all. It is really nice morning here. We have a little bit of frost though, but I hope it is not that bad in your area. And welcome to this workshop. When Anna contacted me back in July or August, and she asked about this topic, she felt that this is an area where our growers there in Maine and in the area of New England, they are really interested to hear and know about. And so hopefully this workshop is gonna address some of your questions. Maybe it won't answer all your questions or things that you have, but at least it is something that we can take something out of it as a take-home message and see how we can improve our carbon farming. Today, as you have seen, we have several polls that we will do in between the presentation, before, after, in between, and we will have sessions where we will have breaks just to stretch a little bit, go to the bathroom, come back. Also, we will have time to ask your questions and answer them. And at the end, Anna has prepared some evaluations for the workshop. So we'll start with a little bit of background before we go in depth into the organic and the carbon farming. So we all know that soil is a dynamic natural resource and it is made up of minerals. Minerals, they made up about 45% of the total soil and with equal quantities of air and water. The 5% of that soil is about organic matter. Now, this organic matter, it could be between 1 to 5, depends on the quality of the soil. The mineral matter, we know that it has sand, silt, and clay. The sand are the coarser sizes, and silt medium, and clay is the fine size. They're different proportions, and their mixes in any kind of mineral soil what makes those soil classes, and we call them textural soils. So this is a triangle where we use usually to learn about which one is how much percent of silt or clay or sand, and then we come up and we find what type of soil we have. Soil organic matter, which we talked about it, it is between 1 to 5% by weight, but it is small, but it also has a big impact on our environment and the ecosystem. In fact, the soil organic matter is made up mainly of 3 different components, and people have used them and called them in a different way, but maybe it is in a way that people can relate to them. So one component, they call it the living, and it can be about 10 to 15% of that 5%, dead or active. And sometimes I say, well, how it can be active if you are dead? But this is something, it means about what is the activity happening there. Very dead, meaning passive. So it is up to 80%, and their location of all these components of the organic matter can be in different particles, pores. So on this right side, you could see that the living includes the roots of the plants, and they are living, and the soil organisms that are alive and occupying the aggregates, and mainly the bigger medium to large aggregates. And so they are on between those 2 types of aggregates and inside mainly the large. So they have the movement going from one area to the other. The active, or what we call it dead, it is mainly what has been just cut, or the biomass that was cut, or the cover crop was cut, or anything, or the leaf just dropped down. So it is a fresh and partially decomposed residue in these spaces and occupies also the same area where the living. So those 2 components, they go back and forth, and so they are mostly together in the same aggregates where they occupy. However, the passive, it's very dead, and what sometimes people call it the humus. It is made of molecules and fragments that are dead microorganisms. So this is where everything is dead. It is already no more decomposition is happening there. And also they are held into the clay particles and the silt. So these are the areas, because they are very small and they are very tight. So they are not available in the macro and the medium size aggregates. They are put into the smallest spaces. And so these are not available for microorganisms to chew on them or decompose them. These are where the storage of the soil organic matter is really staying for many, many years. So let's take each part and talk about it. So here, the first one is the living part. Is there where you have microorganisms, you have plant roots, you have insects, you have all the earthworms and large animals. So except the plant roots, they use and feed on the plant residues and manures for energy. However, the plant roots, they have a different way of using energy. Those ones, they use the plant residues and manures. That's why I said there is a connection between the living and the dead compartments. In fact, the sticky material, the glues that the fungi, they secrete, along with the skin of the earthworms, they bind to the soil particles. And that's what gives our stabilization of our soil, and the soil would be a good structure. That's where it starts. The earthworms and some of the fungi and plant roots, they produce also channels. So those, in addition, make also more of the infiltration to go easier and will help to have aeration. That's where the aeration and the water will be improved in that section where the macro and the medium particles are really occupied by those living parts. For the dead ones, which we call it the active, it is easily decomposed fraction, meaning the fresh residues that we have from either the microorganism or residue of insects or earthworms, or even an old plant root that has been decomposing, crop residues, anything that falls, leaf at this time, recently added manures. These are the ones that just recently in the process of decomposition. This active fraction is the main supply for the food of microorganisms, insects, and earthworms in the living part of the soil. The very dead, which is the humus, it includes organic substances that are difficult to decompose, and that we call them recalcitrant or resistant to any decomposition. And these stores for many, many, many years. So those ones in the humus or in the very dead, they are protected against any organisms, and they will stay there for many years. And humus as well will hold into some essential nutrients, not only the material, but also nutrients in there, and they store them and produce them at slow release. In fact, the beauty about humus, when you have more of that, that's where it holds to pesticides and heavy metals, meaning it will not be given in an area where that plant will be taking it up quickly, because it is extremely slow over many years to have those pesticides or heavy metals that can be toxic to the plant. The humus can be playing also a different role in improving soils, especially those that are like the clay, that have poor drainage, they have so much compaction. The humus can reduce that compaction because it becomes like a sponge and making it more aerated. However, the sandy soils that are bigger size, they are coarse, and they have so much aeration, you want to have more water holding into it, it becomes also like the sponge that it is really keeping that water for the sandy soils. I want to bring also this idea of charcoal and char because people have been talking about it as one of the methods to do carbon sequestration or carbon farming. So it is another type of organic matter for sure. It resulted long time from past fires that occurred naturally. And many soils, you may find here and there some pieces of charcoal. In fact, as an example, the soil of Saskatchewan in Canada have relatively high amounts of char. And these are prairies that have been burnt naturally over time, long period of time. They are really good, they are stable, and they keep the carbon, and they have high carbon cation exchange capacity, and they support biological activity by providing only the habitat. So again, they support the biological activity by providing a habitat, but they do not provide them with food. So it is very important to understand that if we are only providing a habitat, they need food, these microorganisms. And to do that, not only if you feel that charcoal can be added, if it is available, and you think it would be part of it because they don't have access to food through it, but you have to add something such as plant residues or compost that will really help to move that cycle of nutrient cycling and building of more of the aggregates and more of the stability. Thus, the carbon and carbon organic matter, we talk about them in a way that sometimes we say, oh, well, carbon or organic matter, and people use them interchangeably. In fact, carbon is the building block of the organic molecules. And also organic matter includes, in addition to carbon, other nutrients. So we need to make sure that we understand which one we are using when we talk about assessing the soils. But we know that the carbon is strongly related to the organic matter, meaning if I assess my soil and send it to the lab and they say, well, this soil here is high in carbon, but this field is low in carbon, I could understand it is correlation that, well, if it is high in carbon, meaning it is gonna be high in organic matter and the other way around. So usually what we say that if I want to assess and I have carbon, I multiply it by 2, and that will give me what would be an organic matter in my soil. There is another form that it is also considered a form of carbon, and this is the limestone, that it is natural occurring, the limestone, which is made of calcium carbonate because it has carbon, oxygen, and calcium. And those are available in the glaciated areas and the semi-arid regions. Unlike that, in Florida, where, as an example, in humid climates, you will see that there are more than only the organic carbon molecule or the organic carbon that it is equal to total carbon. They have what it is called the inorganic carbon. And so in that case, we cannot just go and multiply that number by 2 and say, oh, this is how much organic matter. So it is a totally different calculations for that. Thus, we understand now that soil is the largest stock of the organic carbon. And we know also that carbon is the primary component, play an extremely key role in the ecosystem because it can enhance water holding capacity, as we have seen. It can do nutrient retention availability and provide stability for the soil over many, many years. Thus, organic matter contains about 4 times carbon as living plants and carbon stored in all the soils, it's about 2 to 3 times what you can find in the atmosphere. So meaning that it is a great box where we can store that excess of carbon or carbon dioxide in the atmosphere. And so most of the time we will have most of that carbon, if it is stored, it would be 2 to 3 times what it is in the atmosphere as carbon. So soil organic matter is considered the foundation for healthy and productive soils. Despite it is very small amount, yet it influences all soil properties and makes it more fertile. There are research that done in Maryland, and they tested that they were increasing the percent of organic matter, and they found that if they increase it by 1%, their increase in corn per acre increased to 80 bushels. That's with one increase of organic matter. That's really important how the fertility can improve the yield of the and the quality of any crop that we produce. Under normal conditions, people would be, as well as livestock and microorganisms, they will use energy inside that carbon and they convert it, meaning they take the starch, they take the sugar and convert them into another energy using the oxygen in that case and producing heat and carbon dioxide. However, the extraction of huge amounts of sequestered fossil carbon as fossil fuel tipped that balance in the carbon cycle. And so now we are having more dense forms of carbon when burned, released to the atmosphere and in the form of CO2. The carbon dioxide emissions and other gases such as nitrous oxide and methane, they are becoming the talk of the words for many, many years. And now we have seen that anytime the solar energy hits the earth and then the rays are used by plants and then or hits the surface soil, it is going back as an infrared. Usually, if we don't have this, what you call it, the blanket that it is caused by the carbon dioxide and other gases, those infrareds will leave and will not be impacting to make much heat. But now those gases are really making like a blanket, keeping that hot air, infrared inside and heating our planet. And that really is going to cause a lot of trouble. Although if you increase the carbon dioxide, the plants will grow more and faster, but that has impact on our the frozen ice places and also on the wind and the climate change. Not to mention also that anytime these oceans that also they capture also that carbon dioxide, if they have more of these levels of carbon dioxide beyond what is normally there, they will start to be acidic, and the acidity will put the marine life in danger. So for example, here, as I mentioned, that the climate change impacts the air, it makes it warm. You will have the glaciers melting, thawing of the frozen soil. So we will not have like a certain period of winter time where the soil is frozen and it is cold air. And so that we usually use it as a method in a way that it is like natural way of killing the pests and not let them continue. More and more we see that the warm air and the season is extending every year by 1 week or 10 days. And so even the winter season is getting shorter and shorter, but now we are getting even extreme weathers in certain places, rain intensity in many, and frequent dry conditions in other places. So it is becoming erratic. Not only the carbon dioxide is a gas that is really bad, but it is also the excess of it, the methane and nitrous oxide, all those play together a role in trapping the heat and causing the global warming and what we call it, the greenhouse effect. Maybe you have heard about it in the news lately, but the COP26, it stands for Conference of the Parties, is currently now in meetings in Glasgow, United Kingdom, and those are the world leaders that they meet every year, and since 1992, and their job is to commit to do stabilization of these greenhouse effects or concentrations and make sure that we don't exceed, but also to find methods and ways to reduce those gas emissions. And so in 2020, they did not meet because of COVID-19, but I remember one time I was reading one of the news and says, well, the gas emissions was less because not all factories were working and people working. And so meaning the human activities really led to a little bit of not decrease too much, but not to increase it at a higher level. So here is the latest. I pulled this from the information about the carbon dioxide concentration in November 3rd. And this is an observatory in Hawaii, where they record the carbon dioxide concentration over time. And this is between 1960 and 2020, which is where we are here. And you could see this oscillations, this one, it is going up, up, up. And in fact, it is increasing since 1995 more sharply over here. If you take that slope versus this slope here. And then if you take that last area between 2016 and 2020, you see it on this graph here. It is telling us again, like, this is the carbon dioxide, and these are the red ones, are the oscillations between 1 year. So each point is a month. And so it tells you how the oscillations of carbon dioxide increases, decreases. So here at the beginning of the season comes March, April, and then it goes up. All the activities in the summer and the heat and things start going. And then when we come down all the way to the winter, it goes down. And so here is mostly in the winter time where you will see less of those CO2 emissions. And mostly they are during the time between April or March through September. And so the black one is the taking each point and dividing it by the average of that year and making that line over there. But if you look here, it is still going up, and that's really difficult to see, because if it was about 297 in 1960, and now we are really getting to 413 today, meaning that what we are expecting is that if we don't work all together to improve and capture that carbon dioxide, then we are gonna toast ourselves, our animals, our plants in the near future. So human activities, as I said, such as burning the fossil fuels and clearing the forest, disturbing soils, are all examples of the carbon dioxide release. Not to mention also among the agricultural practices, Anytime we are using fossil fuels to driving a tractor, tilling the soil, if we are disturbing that organic matter, oxidizing it and go into CO2, into the atmosphere, overgrazing because the soil now is not really having enough time to recover, and it keeping the grazing of animals there, that will also cause a lot of CO2 going there. Usually, if you are using synthetic fertilizers, it also enhances the priming of the organic matter and makes more of the release, active release quickly, but it really makes more of the microorganism not doing their enough job to make sure that there is a what you call it, storage of the organic matter. Pesticides, people have been using pesticides and herbicides. Of course, these also result in a significant CO2 release. So when we are talking about soil organic matter, it really impacts the physical structure of the soil. It really impacts the chemical properties as well as the biological properties. And we can say that it is if you cannot build the soil organic matter, if you are burning more carbon than you are producing, meaning keep using it, it is like your bank and you keep taking money out of it. And if you don't put back anything, you are going to get in a situation where you will be broke. And so the best way is that we understand this soil organic matter as your capital, as your money, as your currency. And that would be to help you in growing your money, your assets, and for your stability. And then you can expand from that. And the best way to measure this soil capital is by understanding and measuring the soil organic matter in the soil. So the soil carbon sequestration, or what we call it carbon farming, it involves implementation of practices that are known to improve the rate of which carbon dioxide is removed. It is the rate, it is how much per time. It is taking that carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and convert it into a plant material and or soil organic matter. This is what we consider sequestration. It has to go through those steps. Carbon farming recognizes that carbon is your energy currency for all living animals. So we need that carbon as a money, as a currency to work with. The carbon is a medium that really allows the solar energy to go through it and radiates into the food system or the food web through the farm system. The carbon farming focuses on the opportunities of increasing the capacity of farm system, meaning how you increase your capacity by receiving, capturing, putting it, storing it, and release whenever you need for the environment when it is growing. The critical role of soil organic matter, as both can be used as a sink for the solar energy and a driver for both the soil and the agrosystem dynamics. In other words, we can say you can do a successful carbon farming. I could say I am a grower that I am really establishing and doing a carbon farming only when I have gains more than the losses. And that's, I would say, yes, I am successful. I could be doing carbon farming, but I could be not having more gains that more than the losses. There are always gains and there are always losses, but it is the net that if you have more than what you lose, that's when you are start to store it and make much of it and expand on it, give you more stability. So we talked that it should be through the plants. And when we talk about plants and storing energy, meaning any plant will be taking that light, the energy coming from that sun, in addition to the carbon dioxide that it is already available in the atmosphere with the water that is available for the plant. These three, they will change it, and through photosynthesis process, we call it, they make their sugars or the carbohydrates, which is the food that they need, and they emit or spit out the oxygen. In other words, if you are more of a chemical person, you could say, okay, I'm taking the water and taking the carbon dioxide. Here is the energy of the soil going into the chlorophyll of the plant in certain places in the chloroplast, and then it is making the sugar for the whole plant and releasing with time that oxygen. And so that plant is doing all this kind of factory every single minute, keeping doing that because they wanted to use it. They want to use it to respire. They want to use it to grow, and they want to use it even after to keep that matter into the residue. So these are important to establish soil organic matter and make sure that we are having them in a way that they are living and resilient to any changes such as the climate change. So selection of those plants would be very important as well. So when we talk about carbon farming, it is a whole farm approach. It is not one item alone and we say, oh, I am doing this. You have to think about it in a whole farm approach. It is a framework where you have to engage the agrosystem processes and that drive the system to change. The carbon farming is recognizing that the solar energy is what drives the farm ecosystem, and the carbon is the carrier of that energy to which the farm system, within the farm system. When we talk so many times, we say, well, I'm doing carbon farming, and synonymously, it is like regenerative agriculture. So regenerative agriculture is where we are considering the soil, the organic matter, we are considering the stability and resiliency, we are considering not using fossil fuel-based fertilizers or pesticides, or avoiding the tillage or reducing as minimum the tillage, using systems that can add rather than keep taking from the harvest and not adding back to the soil itself. This is what it is about carbon farming. Mainly, when we talk about boosting the carbon sequestration on organic farms, we are talking about conservation tillage, like I mentioned earlier, that as much as I can avoid these drastic and intensive tillage practices or number of tillage that we do, we could probably get by a rotational, and we can reduce and conserve by using different equipment that we used to use long time during the industrial era. Cover crops, we all know for the past at least 20 years, NRCS has been advocating and educating people that keeping the soil surface covered is an important role in keeping your organic matter there, because you are recycling the nutrients, you are keeping the residues, you are keeping the roots there, and you are not allowing much of that soil to be eroded by wind or to be intensively tilled. Also, organic matters, organic amendments, such as using compost or manure. Research has found that it is better to use compost rather than directly application of manure, and it is the quickest or gives you the shortest period of time to reach your goal of what you call it, building or storing more of the organic matter. This means that when we talk about organic amendments, we need to rehabilitate the degraded soil, increasing the storage, enhancing water holding capacity, and providing more nutrients to the plant. Livestock manure and green mulches like whenever we cut the plants and leave them there, or when we have a green manure, which is considered sometimes a waste, it is part of the soil amendments. But we found also composting them is really much better to compost those wastes rather than put them as is as land application, because when you leave the manure as is or the green mulches, they are exposed to microorganisms that they can emit some gas emissions relatively to the decomposed that it is coming from a compost. It doesn't mean that compost doesn't release gas emissions, but it is very little compared to the applications of a freshly cut, or it is a material that it is manure that has not been composted yet. So we have to think of how we should be, the resources that we have, what they can cause for the environment, how they can be used best to improve the fastest way to reach the storage of this carbon into the soil and improve the dynamics, the ecosystem altogether. So in the organic amendments, the composting process, it is really important because what it does, it takes that nitrogen and complex it with the organic molecules. This means it is slowing the decomposition rate and associated nitrogen mineralization, meaning it is not keeping that nitrogen to go away as fast as possible. The nitrogen, if you all know about nitrogen, is already existing as 78% in the atmosphere, but the nitrogen that we have in the waste or manure or green manure, it is all nitrogen that it is a precursor for the nitrous oxide, which is one of the gases that we are avoiding to have building in the atmosphere. We know that it is very potent, the nitrous oxide, and it is worse than carbon dioxide. It is 298 times worse than the carbon dioxide on a 100-year time scale. So we have to be extremely careful that when we think about what we are doing as organic growers, or even if you are transitioning to organic, or if you are doing things on a small scale or a large scale, which method is really you are contributing to? Are you contributing to the storage, or you are contributing to the emissions? So these are information is very important for you. So although, as I mentioned, that composting does have some complexation and a little bit of gas emission, but it's nowhere comparable to those ones that they are when you have the direct applications of the manure or the green waste to the soil. It is better that we apply it as a compost because it can lead us to better productivity and sustainability. Another way to think about is the landfills and the anaerobic lagoons. We have many growers, especially in Pennsylvania, where they have a lot of livestock, and also there are places where have livestock in the Midwest. And if they have the lagoons, it is really what it does. It's continued to emit these methane and nitrous oxide. So it is important for us that we know that lagoons, that material, if we we have one grower, he took that material and he just spread it directly onto the soil. And then what he did is that allowed that more of the nitrous oxide to get up to the atmosphere, although he's an organic farmer. But we have to be very careful because also the food waste and yard waste, if you put them in landfills, they go under anaerobic conditions and they transfer to and convert it into methane. Unless that methane is an enclosed spot, that it is not released to the atmosphere, but it is used for other resources, then we are more into a way that we are conserving these gases to a better use. So we have to be very careful on how we should go with that. The carbon farming is successful, as I mentioned, when you have gains more than the losses. Here you have some of these additions. We can check that, like I have more root exudates because I have more roots there, that they are having more of the microorganisms that are going symbiotically with them. Plant residues, I keep more of the plant residues when I harvest rather than I take the whole crop out. The manure that it is really composted is much better than, although some people still use manures, but if it is composted is much better. However, if we reduce all those losses through respiration and tillage and erosion, then we are more having a net balance to have more of the organic matter in the soil. So what are the factors that contribute to additions or decomposition of the soil organic matter? These could include temperature, rainfall, or texture. And let's talk about the temperature here. So the cold regions like Maine or the Arctic areas higher than Maine, there is no much organic matter added due to a short season of growing plants. However, there is a slow decomposition rate due to cold temperatures. The rainfall has an impact on whether we add or decompose the soil organic matter. So you could see that in arid areas where there's very little of rainfall there, the addition is extremely low and even the decomposition. But in areas where you have more rainfall, you have more plant residue returns, and these returns are restricting the air. So you will have less decomposition and losses because it is going into an anaerobic situation. And so with those, you can tell how your answers were based on this information. For example, the texture, those who answered like the fine texture soils containing high percentage of clay and silt, and they tend to have the highest amounts of soil organic matter. So the coarse textures such as sand or sandy loam would be lesser to accumulate that high organic matter. So you could see that if you are having soil that is more texture sand, you have maybe less than 1% of soil organic matter. And if it is in a loamy soil, you will have 2 to 3%, but those that are clayey, you will have more of the soil organic matter. And that's because the clay is very fine particles and they are compacted. And as we said, that those micropores, micro aggregates that work with the clay will not allow much of those disturbances that are, or entrances by microorganisms to go there and decompose them. And that's how those texture or rainfall or temperature could contribute to the way that you are adding or decomposing soil organic matter. All right, so let's talk about the drainage. So if it is well drained, meaning you have more of the air available in the soil, more than the water. And this means what? You have more oxygen, and meaning that you are oxygenating the soil organic matter. And so meaning you will have the microorganisms will be able to use that material there to oxidize the soil organic matter and decompose it with their enzymes. So well-drained doesn't mean that it is good, but it doesn't mean over a long period of time you are going to build or add much of your soil organic matter because of those bigger aggregates that are filled with air. On the other hand, the poorly drained, less aeration, meaning you are going under anaerobic conditions in that soil. Most of that airspace is filled for a very long time. It will be very, very slow to decompose. And all that plant material that it is made of lignin or organic material that it is made of lignin, which is pretty difficult to be decomposed, are not decomposed because they are not accessible. And so most of the time you will see that wetlands and swamps for a very long time, they will build the soil organic matter. And that's what you will see in muck soils, that they have been over many, many years, hundreds of years, that they were under like wetlands or swamps, and they have about 20% soil organic matter. Thus, the landscape also, those soils that are in the depressions, meaning at the bottom of the slope, they will have more organic matter. And this is, everybody got it right, where because all that erosion of the smaller particles of the silt and the clay are coming all the way down with the water flooding down there from the uphill and leaving the uphill eroded with the bigger size of the particles and having more air to be going there and more porosity. And so here I will show you, like last week, we had an event at Rodal Institute where there were about 9 soil pits were dug. There is a project with Dalval University, and they have a project where they want to take different areas at Rodal because they have been managed differently, let's say. And they brought their students there to show them about the different soil profiles and how different management practice could lead to that. Excuse me 1 second. And so here on the left, I took this photo from a colleague of mine when his kids came checking these pits, our young scientists, we call them. So this is at the top of the hill, and you can see the bigger particles stays there, but at the bottom of the slope where we have the apple orchard down there, this is where all the organic matter have been over the past 50 years building over that soil. And you can see it is like day and night between these two. It's the same orchard, but one at the top and one at the bottom. Again, we have also another pit that was close to the forest soil. You could see how beautiful it is. That has a lot of dark material. This is all the organic material. And you can see at least a foot and a half probably that is building over time because it is not disturbed as much as an agriculture area where we had disturbance. And you could see that it is only a small area here where the roots are coming. And probably you can see some of them here, which is about a foot or a foot and a half. But that tells you that the way of managing and the source of the soil, how it was building that, or the landscape could make a big difference in the carbon farming. Again, We can talk about grasses and broadleaf vegetation. If we take any annual grass over there, like wheat over here, and this is another wheat, which is the Carranza, and that's having, you could see in the first year, these are both wheat, but this has at least 5 times length in 1 year of roots. And we said that the roots are really important because these are the ones that they work with the microorganisms. And without them, it would be so difficult to build the coverage of the plants and also to have more of storage of the organic matter at a higher rate. So if you look over a year and a half or 2 years, that root of the annual grain or annual wheat didn't even go more than 6 inches, but this guy is really having a lot of roots, and this gives you a lot of biomass that increases the population of the microorganisms that they can provide more. So in other words, we have also to think about whether we should think as annually, or we can think with including perennial grasses. But also we can think also looking at broadleaf. How many of you also have used black-eyed Susan for landscaping? You see how much root it can do there versus any of the grasses that we have. And so this can be another way of, if you want to improve or mitigate an area that it is pretty low in the organic matter, this can be one of the methods to choose the vegetation that you want. Even the blue stem, the big blue stem is pretty known for its length and the width of those roots there. So these are information that really should be able to take and use in your farming operation and in the approach that you want to take if you want to contribute to carbon farming. So those grasslands, rangelands, people who are already having, like in the Midwest and areas where they have grasslands, they have a great potential to use them as reservoirs for organic matter. In fact, they are the biome, part of the biome that experience seasonal water deficits. So sometimes when the plant is really in a situation where there is not much rainfall, so it gives a way to the plant that they have to explore more into in the soil profile, and that makes more exploration to improve more of the biomass of the root there and bringing more of that plant material. But also they go into situations where they die and come back, they die and come back, and meaning that cycle of dying and coming back, it will really help to build that organic material in the soil. So that would be good if we are managing grasslands pretty well. But if we are not really managing those rangelands pretty well, we are contributing intensively to the carbon dioxide emissions, and that will affect about in the production as well as in the leading to land degradation over time. The type of vegetation we talk about, the grassland versus forest, we see deeper and more soil organic matter under the grassland because it has extensive root system and it turnover of the roots that makes it dying and coming back and exploring more area in the soil profile. Acid conditions of the soil also is another thing that we need to think. Some areas that they have more acidic soils, and some areas that they have more neutral to alkaline. And so these soils may vary in how much the rate of accumulation. And because most of the acid soils, you will see that they prevent or limit the earthworm activities there. And so because they are limiting that activity, it will really initiate more of the building of the organic matter rather than distributing that organic matter all the way to the soil and make it diluted, but they are making it more sticking into the area there and not to be chopped and used by the earthworms. If we are looking about what is more important, the above ground or the root for the soil organic matter distribution, we think that always the higher percent of roots contribute more and by weight, and it is more resistant because they are in the area where we call them the dead or the very dead than the above ground, that they are exposed to the microorganism, to oxygen and to temperature, they are exposed to erosion, those all different areas. So when we compare above ground residues, many crop roots that have higher amounts of lignin, they will have a slow decomposing material. So it is important that also if we are mitigating an area and we want to get it in the future to be used, is that we select the plants that they have more lignin in their roots, so it can provide more of a slower decomposition. Example here, the oats are one of those that they have lignin, and so after 1 year, 1/3 of that material on the surface remain, which is about 30%, let's say, and about 43% of the root organic remain. However, if you compare the oats, which is a cereal, a grass, to a hairy veg, which is a legume, you can see after the incorporation of that in the spring, only 13% is left as a residue on the surface. However, after 5 months, however, 50% of the root of the hairy veg is still there, and it is really contributing to the organic matter. Both root residues of this crop contribute much more to the particulate organic matter. And when maybe you have heard people talking about the particulate organic matter, meaning the particles, like you remember I said about the macro and the medium and the larger particles. And so these are the particles where usually they occupy most of those residues that they are in the living and the dead. So it is really where we have the particulate organic matter than in the above ground. So the management options that we need to increase soil organic matter. And I say here the new management options are needed in order to maintain and restore. I'm not saying new, it has to be very, very new, but we have to be new in a way that we have to think differently, and think differently in a way that we are working towards that, capturing that carbon rather than producing it. Increasing the carbon, organic carbon, can have a tremendous potential to increase the water holding capacity and increase resilience to drought, rainfall variability, and soil erosion, as we have mentioned. If we are using the benefits from organic matter, we can reap even more by improving nutrient availability, because there would be more of cation exchange capacity, and there would be organic matter attached to the clay material. And we can also have improved nutrient retention, because those plants would be able to have their roots going into those particles and also having those nutrients available for them to be taken up. The improved soil health associated with increased soil organic matter, at the end, it will increase your production, it will increase your returns of currency and money, and it will help also the system to mitigate the climate change through increased plant carbon capture and carbon sequestration. Here is a list that I selected, and I get that from the USDA and RCS greenhouse gases ranking tool. And they have listed all those as parts or practices that people could work with them and according to their situations and according to their farm that really can contribute to it. And many people, they learn things from their parents or grandparents, and they are still going through it. And there are new growers who have a way that they can see the imminent threat that we have from these gas emissions, and they want to make sure that they keep that soil is really productive for them, for their children and others. And so we are in a situation that we can now select more than one system. We can select different approaches and practices and put them together. And maybe one area is better to have one of it that you can use compost and mulching, and maybe the other area is better to keep using a silvopasture establishment. And these are depends on your climate, depends on the slope that you have, the landscape. So I'm gonna put all these lists for you, but I highlighted one here, the residue tillage management, no-till, strip till, direct seeding, as one of where I would go in depth about it. So let's talk about mulching and compost application. You can mulch in between the rows and you can put compost. As we said, compost is better to use because than any land applied manure. The anaerobic digesters also, they are good because they are not allowing those gases to get into the air. Multi-story cropping, meaning you can put several types of crops in the same area, so you can keep all the soil covered, and you can go as you go, you intercrop, and you can continue harvesting and continue keeping the root there and not allowing the soil to be without any coverage. Windbreaks are also one of the systems that we can use to capture carbon. It's not only what we produce as a crop, but also what we can put there to help us mediate the air flow and also to mitigate the problems that we have if we have, let's say, erosion or something. Silvopasture also is another one where you have trees and pastures where if you have livestock there, you can add a lot of what you call it, shade for the animals, but at the same time, you are allowing the grass to grow there and the pasture that you have, probably you have alfalfa or something, that you have food for the animals there. And at the same time, your livestock is really having a better time of cleaner air and a food that comes with lush of material because it's growing there without disturbance. Another one is forage and biomass planting. We can put those just to have more roots going down there. We know that some of these forage crops and biomass, like the one I talked about, the black eye and the blue stem, these are really making a big biomass in the soil profile. Of course, nutrient management, we have to be careful not to use things that really impact the use of what you call it, the decomposition of the organic matter, and know what we are using, as I said, with the compost and the manure. Tree shrub establishment, sometimes they help for the airflow, and they help for the also for making sure that the soil is really protected at that place. Forest stand improvement, if we have forests around us. Also, we can add to that list vegetative barrier, windbreak, shelter belt renovation, alley cropping. Alley cropping, many people have used it in Latin America. And some of the people, as I have heard at some of the conferences at PASO, they have been talking about those. In fact, we have a grower next to us here in Kutztown, where he is using the alley cropping because of all the slopes he has and because of all the areas, so he can reduce any runoffs, and it helps him to harvest better his crops. Also, as I said, multi-cropping, you can put different crops that you want, keeping the soil instead of having it empty between the crops, but you can put other ones that they are not impacting the growth of the other one, which is the one that comes first. Again, contour buffer strips, riparian restoration, riparian forest buffers. You can put all these if you want, if you have anything that really helps you to control any erosion and also to include fruits, fruit trees or shrubs. You can take more of that, even if you are a vegetable grower. Many people now, they are combining shrubs and trees and flowers and stuff like that together because they are, as I said, they are looking at a whole approach when they are working to restore their soils. The other parts, it is using wind barriers, especially in critical area planting, make sure that it is planted, not allowed to erosion. Grassed waterways, if there are runoffs there and you feel that it is better to put grasses there, it would be good to collect any sediments going in. The hedgerow planting and also crosswind trap strips, conservation cover, and wetland restoration. All these practices can be, it depends on your situation, it depends on the location you have and what you can do to help yourself. You can pick one or two or three or maybe multiple ones, depends on your area. So we talked about the soil so far. We talked about the plants, how they are using photosynthesis and everything. But now let's talk about something else, the animals. And those are the small bio-based animals such as the microbes, bacteria, and fungi. And every grower, every farmer is a livestock farmer. And when we say they are livestock farmers, because these small guys, the microbes, are animals, and so they are livestock farmers. So if you look here on the right, this is the soil food web, and they are constituting mainly of the bacteria, the fungi, the protozoa, the nematodes, and nematodes could be the nematodes that are fungal or bacteria feeders, but also the predators and any arthropods and bigger animals over there. So the job of those bacteria mainly is to start the project of decomposing. So they take that organic matter that it is a waste from the roots or leaves or something, and they start working on it, and they feed on the live plants. Let's say also they are attached to the rhizosphere where they are in close proximity to the roots. And also they live on the, what you call it, on the organic matter to feed from it. And then they keep chopping and what you call it, degrading them along with the fungi. They are both the same. Then comes the protozoa, and what they do, they feed also on bacteria, those ones, and they are also considered the shredders. So they are predators because they feed on the bacteria, but also the shredders, they continue doing the shredding of the material that it is beyond what the bacteria can do. And then comes the fungal bacteria feeding nematodes, which are this size, although these are showing here, but they are, in fact, they are very, very small to see. And these are the ones that feeds for the centipedes, which are the bigger guys over, and the beetles and the mites. Then we have the predatory nematodes. Also, they feed on the nematodes, and they feed also on the protozoa. And then the earthworm feeds on all of them and ingests the soil while it is doing that and getting out the nutrients while it is taking out the soil from their bodies. And those bigger animals, they feed on everybody there. So there are more microbes in a teaspoon of soil than there are people on Earth. And so it contains about 8 to 15 tons of bacteria, fungi and protozoa, nematodes, earthworms, and arthropods in that soil. These microorganisms they survive in large numbers in the soil. And that's why they are very important as a source for carbon. A large number of bacteria in the soil exists, but because of their small number, they have smaller biomass. So they are very minute, they are very tiny, but they exist in large number. Even though they are in large number, they will not give you a bigger biomass. The actinomycetes, they are 10 times the bigger, sorry, in size. They are bigger in size, but they are smaller in number. So meaning because they are big, but they are less than 10 times in number than bacteria, they feel like you have a bigger amount. The fungi or the fungus populations are smaller, but they dominate the soil biomass when the soil is not disturbed, meaning anytime you keep tilling that soil and disturbing the soil, you are increasing more of the bacteria and more of the actinomycete rather than you are increasing the fungi. And that's because the fungi requires a stable situation where the soil is not disturbed, because fungi to populate and to grow, it really needs to send all its hyphae, like the extremities, out in the soil. The time you come and you do your tilling or your chopping or anything, you are really cutting all these pipelines that they are made during the season to bring more water and bring more nutrients to work with the plants. Now you closed all the roads by doing the tillage that you had. The bacteria and the actinomycetes and protozoa, which we talked about, these are the ones that are hardy and can tolerate more soil disturbance. So anytime you disturb the soil, you will have more of those bacteria and actinomycetes and protozoa. Protozoa feeds on the bacteria, that's why they are always together there. And so they are more hardy and they can tolerate any disturbance more than we said about the fungal. While fungal and nematode population tend to dominate in untilled and no-till soil. So mostly if you go to forest areas and you take a soil sample and you check it out to see how much bacteria you have, actinomycete, you have fungi and nematodes, the ratio of having more of the nematodes and fungi to bacteria would be much higher than any agricultural soil that has been through the tillage. And if you take a soil that has been not tilled for the last 15 years, definitely is totally different from the one that has been extensively tilled and has low organic matter. The soil is a living organism, and it has about 10,000 pounds of biological material, which is equivalent to 2 elephants in weight. So that's how much the healthy soil would be having microorganisms. It takes a lot to feed them. So if you have that number, what you are gonna feed them with? You need food security for them. And so they are having a relationship with the roots there, and they need that food. And that food is coming as a carbon, and that carbon is coming from where? From the plants. Those are their food security. Now, the plants, although the nitrogen is available in the atmosphere with about 78%, the plants cannot take that nitrogen and use it directly. Although you say, well, a legume is there, I'm growing a legume that I am getting the nitrogen. The legume is not, the plant is not taking like carbon dioxide or oxygen, is not taking that directly, that nitrogen, cannot chop it, that nitrogen, because it is very covalently bonded with nitrogen atom with nitrogen atom. It cannot break it. So what we need in that case is like a legume or any of those plants that even not legume, that they have other types of bacteria that live on their roots. What they are doing, they are taking that nitrogen from the air, put them in small pockets, we call them nodules, like if we are doing the rhizobia, and changing that nitrogen into a form that will really help the plant now to take it. But there is a price for that. In order for those nitrogen to go into the plant has, even if it is a plant that it is a legume, the plant has to give in some, and that thing, the energy is carbon. So you will see a give and take. There is a trading in between them. So in analogy to that, we say plants through photosynthesis produce the carbon. So it is a complex economy, yes, because going on within the soil, you have the plants use carbon as a currency. They have the money, which is the sugar, which is the carbon in their hands, and they want to go and shop around for nitrogen or phosphorus or other nutrients. But they need the one who is giving them that nitrogen. And those could be the rhizobacteria that they are purchasing the nitrogen from them. So the whole key for soil health is about carbon. The microorganisms cannot populate and continue doing what they are doing if they don't have that source of carbon. That meaning we have to have plants. And the plants cannot continue growing if they cannot make those nitrogen or phosphorus come to them and help them to grow more and produce more. So the only way is that through photosynthesis. The more carbon in the soil means I have to grow plants more often, meaning I can continue to have production of plants at a higher rate, and it can be a very good system. So when we talk about what the microorganisms eat, a soil that is low in carbon, meaning it is low in biology. And only healthy soil that sequesters carbon would be the one that comes from the plant. Using water and energy from sunlight like the plants do, they absorb that carbon and dioxide and break it down into oxygen and carbon-based liquid sugars. Those sugars, as I said, they come out from the root system as exudates, and that is our currency that the plant is using to purchase the goods, which is in that case the nitrogen that it is coming by the use of those rhizobacteria. So always there is a trading of goods. There is an exchange of nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, let's say, and sometimes they have trace minerals as exchange as well. So the part of the deal will include getting the nitrogen, other nutrients, transport cycle the nutrients throughout the soil, break soil compounds down into plant available forms. So the nitrogen, instead of being N2, it would be used as ammonium or nitrate, and protect the plants from soil-borne diseases and pests, because now we have more strength plant there, and we have the good fungi that are working and the good bacteria around them that will help them to protect from any diseases. Sometimes you will see some predatory nematodes, they predate on the bad fungi that live in the soil around the roots, and they can just take that out and suppress those diseases. So when we talk about the economy, about carbon capturing and storing, it is like our economy. So meaning we need to have supply and demand. The supply is the plants that supply the carbon. It's bringing more economy to the world. This means the soil is a supplier of the nutrients, the habitat. It is providing water storage also. And it also provides the fixation of the nitrogen and making also the biology defend the whole system. So it is a great area to look at how the plants really help the system. But there's also a demand in the economy. And so when we have a supply and demand, the plants need nutrients and water, they go back to these microorganisms and get what they want for their trading. In return, that there would be plant needs services. So they are taking more of the support and the protection from these microorganisms. The root is going deeper into the soil profile. They are more supported and they are making more of the nutrient and sugar, so they are protected. And so now we are having these services met by having more of the supply and demand, and the biota needs food and habitat, as we know, and those are met by the system of supply and demand. So when we talk about the producers, these are the sellers, or the consumers, they are the buyers. And in that case, one of those indicators is that we have a good economy when we don't have an employment rate pretty high, meaning we are all consumers, but we are also producers. So we are all employed. And so when all the components of the ecosystem employed, meaning everyone is producing and consuming and producing all together in connection to help this ecosystem, meaning we have very low unemployment rate, and then that will not cause any tip off in the economy that really get us under pressure or under stress. And so in the ecosystem also, it is very important that we have enough of those production, the sellers and the consumers, so we can improve the whole system. In the industrial ag model that people have been doing for the last 100 years really impacted the system, because every time we are decomposing the carbon dioxide and reducing the organic matter slowly from 4%, and now we are having 2%, and now we're having 1.2%, as we are going and putting pesticides and taking the fossil fuel and all that. What we are doing, in fact, we are causing to put more of the fertilizer back, the synthetic fertilizer, or amending the soil and adding from the outside. So adding is not like you are letting the plant to do its job in correlation or in connection with the microorganism. You are just adding as if it is a welfare system. The more you have more of the supply and demand always working together, and you are increasing the biomass of the crops, and you are increasing the root system, and you are increasing the biomass of the microbiology, that system is going to continue growing and becoming resilient to any of the climate change. And you will not need to add more of the amendments there, because it's going to be continuously working together. So the resources we are talking about, they are free, mainly the solar energy. It is free. We always have it, and we are blessed that we have the solar there, the sun that brings us all the energy that we need for the plants and the human and the animals. We have carbon in the atmosphere as well. It is there, and we have it now in excess, so we can make use of it. In fact, I read the other day an article says that they can sequester carbon dioxide, the excess of it, from the air and make it into diamonds. So people are making diamonds out of that rather than storing it into the soil, but they are making money out of it. So there are different ways of how people can think of that carbon. Same with the nitrogen. It is a free resource, but of course we cannot break this the double covalent bonding that we have in nitrogen as the plant, but it has to depend on the organisms that they can do that. And these are the biological factories that we are really need there. In addition to the rhizobia that are the factories for legumes in nodules, we know that they strip that nitrogen and give it, and they take in return the root exit, it's the sugars. And also they can provide better health for the system. Now, in one of the experiments shows that soybean production increased by 75 bushels that needs about 600 pounds of nitrogen. But the bill of nitrogen is free because we are not adding nitrogen when we are growing fava bean, or we are growing soybean, or we are growing any cowpea or something, because we can, because these plants can take that nitrogen without paying for it. We are not adding anything. And so this is really important to think about. There are other plants other than legumes, as I said, that they have other bacteria that live with them, as Azospirillum and Azobacter. And these are associated with other plants like grass plants, and they can fix about 20 to 40 pounds of nitrogen. So these are also available that can be not only used by themselves, but the beauty about that, the connection that happens in the soil, even if you have a plant that doesn't have any of those bacteria that can help. So what you can do, you can, in the multiple cropping, you can put those plants next to each other, and the roots would be talking to each other via the fungi, via the bacteria, and those nutrients can go into the plant next door, and the plant can grow. They are working in a community, working together, rather than having one row of the same thing and nothing else in between. This is really how you can make use of those nutrients and the bacteria that grow on certain plants. Other minerals such as calcium and magnesium and micronutrients are also available in the soil, but not added via fertilizer. Plants cannot take it without the help of the biology. Again, these are cations that really need some work of the biology along with the plants to work in providing those elements to help in reducing the deficiencies. I took this from the internet there, where they are talking about mycorrhizal fungi and the mineral resources. I'm sure you have heard about mycorrhizal fungi, which is the arbuscular mycorrhizal fungi. These are the fungi, they live in symbiosis with the roots of the plants. And so these arbuscules, this is under the microscope, you will see smaller dots here, but if you look in depth down there, they are arbuscules, meaning like small trees inside the root tissue. And so these are the headquarters where they send all the information out, and they send these hyphae, you could see them here, and they go all the way to bring nutrients and water from around the plant or in the soil profile through those hyphae, and then they bring it, and in doing that, the plant is giving them the carbon, and in return, they are giving them the water when they need, and they are giving them the nutrients that they need. It is a fascinating thing to see how such a small microorganism can really benefit us without even doing anything. Meaning they are there to help, but they need, like we said, supply and demand, and that really makes everything working. The only thing they need is a habitat that does not cut these hyphae and chop them all the time, because it takes time to grow again. The plant would be in danger every time you do cultivation, seasonal cultivation, and if the mulch or the hyphae has been cut, the plant will be sit stagnant until the hyphae is regrown, and that takes between 4 to 8 weeks to make sure that everything, by that time probably it's too late. And so we have to think a lot how we are producing our plants and how we are working with our soils. So here, before, as I said, I will be talking about no-till, reduced till, strip till. I would like to take a few minutes break. Anna? All right, let's continue now. So let's look at some of those systems. And so when we are thinking about the no-till, we have to think in more than one approach, and that is a system approach, we call it. The approach that you have to think about the rotation, the cover crops that we will be using, what type of soil management you are gonna do, how you evaluate the area that will be changing with time, the residue that you are gonna leave there and how you manage it. Also the varieties that you will select, the management for the pest, fertilization and liming, what kind that you need, and most importantly is the equipment that you will be using to conduct all those in a system approach. So when we talk about crop rotation, we all have used all these plans and we have read about them, but mainly it is what most of the time we have the desire that when we put these crop rotations mainly to help us in successfully control the weeds that we have, also to prevent perennial weeds to come back, also to help us break the cycles of those insects or pests. So we all have seen what you need to use in a 3-year rotation or 5-year rotation or 4-year rotation. And as growers, we have been using those successfully. As far as cover crops, we know that they are really good if we keep them all year around in the soil. And it could be different types of cover crops that we could use there. And sometimes a cover crop could be a crop, even though we call it a cover crop. So it could be a different type of cover crop than the vegetables that we always do. And that could be considered a cover crop when we are using it there. So plant cover crops that keep photosynthesizing the liquid carbon is very important during the winter. So it keeps those microorganisms having what? Their food, because we said that they need always a carbon to go there so they can bring us more nutrients. And so by doing that, they are keeping all that nutrients back and forth, and we are having those cover crops that can overwinter to keep the soil to be taking and storing the carbon dioxide through them and put it in the ground when they are growing. One example that is really cool to use is the fava beans, for example. It sequesters carbon very quickly during the winter, and also it dies. But when it dies, it becomes available for the nutrients for the microorganisms there, and they can replenish the nutrients through the springtime. Here is a list of what could be the benefits of using cover crops, and probably you have seen it, but since we are talking about no-till, I really like to list them all so we know, all of us, that this is an idea that we need to keep doing. Soil coverage, it's really important because we are reducing more of the loss of the finer particles, reduce the erosion, or taking away the pollutants or any of the nutrients that or amendments we put on our soil. we build a better organic matter by using cover crops. They will give us the nitrogen because they are there to give us the supply of nitrogen when the plants give us the give them the carbon. They keep recycling these cover crops through their roots and the nutrients all over between the channels between microbes and the plant, and they become nutrients for microorganisms. And they can help with their biomass that they grow and shading of the soil from any sunlight to hit any of the seeds on the soil surface to germinate from these weeds so much that we can use them, especially when in the rolling crimping that we have that mulch there. It will really help to be suppressing these weeds. Also, as I said, it breaks the pest cycle. They can reduce compaction. Some of those that I will talk about, it will show you how you can reduce the compaction by using these cover crops. You can increase the aggregation because the enzymes that are secreted there through those plants with the fungi that they are producing these proteins together, they are making more of the glues to connect the soil particles. Definitely some of those cover crops, they will have tap roots that they can go down all the way and having increased the infiltration of water. Some of those, they will help in water holding capacity because they are adding more of the organic matter into the soil. Also, you are improving aeration because those roots that they go through the soil at depth, it will just make more channels to go all the way. They reduce soil crusting, definitely, especially in the area where you have a lot of clay. And so that crust that you see in areas where you have much of the clay that it is a smectite clay that really shrinks and expands, shrinks and expands, those crusting also will be reduced when you have more cover crops because they are putting more of the nutrients or the macro aggregates there. By using these cover crops over time, the macro aggregates will start being there to connect the soil. They also, the cover crops, as we said, they work in some of them with fungi, such as the mycorrhizal fungi or any other fungi, so they support each other. So the ideal cover crops should be, when we are selecting them, should be moderately priced, easily established, highly productive, easily killed mechanically, non-allelopathic to main cash crops, because sometimes you will feel like if you are using cereal rye as a cover crop and you come and roll crimpet and you are putting cucurbits after it, it will be difficult for cucurbits to pick up and go on. It has been a problem for many growers, as I have seen. And so allelopathy is one of the major problems. So they were looking for other less allelopathy. They use like triticale with peas. And so that really helped them to put some of the nitrogen from the peas and also to have less allelopathy than the rye. So also we have to think that if you include to the mix fixing nitrogen cover crops. So the key to successful soil health improvement strategy is to do what? Diversifying. You have heard it several times that it is better to diversify. Here is an area where a place where you can diversify, putting more of hairy vetch rye rather than only hairy vetch alone or crimson alone, crimson clover. Because as I said, there are always connection between the channels in the roots between those plants, and they can always give the nitrogen back to the cereal to grow more and give you more biomass. And so this would be much better, because this would be having a lot of material that doesn't degrade a lot on the surface, as well as the roots there, they do not have much, they have lignin that it is not easily decomposable. So it stores carbon in the soil, while some of that material is degrading. If you have hairy vetch alone, you are providing nitrogen to, but you are going to have a quick degradation of the biomass that you will have there. And so the soil would be exposed faster to any sunlight that will hit there, and the soil would be exposed for any seeds of weeds to come back, especially if you have a high weed seed bank. You could choose winter cover crops seeded in mid-fall, like a few months ago, and then these crops will overwinter and can be knocked down or killed by the next season, either by putting summer transplanted cash crops, and then the extensive residues that they produce, like we just said, that they are really good to keep there. Most of the time that we have learned long time ago, they say, well, we roll crimp and we keep that mulch. But really what is really important, it is the root that stays there, that it is there, that keeps along with the time, it is degrading and decomposing with the microorganisms. So it is totally different, like we will see in another approach for no-till, and I will talk about it afterwards in a few slides coming. Basic mix, you can use winter CRI with crimson clover. These both together, they are really good because the rye builds the biomass, catches the nutrients, insulates the crimson clover. It's like helping it to continue growing through the season and from any cold air or difficult time. And both species flower early in the season, which is really needed for any production, especially if you have a short period window open for growing. So adding winter wheat also, and hairy vetch, Austrian winter peas, and red clover multiplies the diversity and make it more photosynthetic. So here you have a collection of different crops. Some of them, they grow upward. Some of them, they grow like a vine. Some of them, they are really short, but they flower early. So the whole structure from the high to the low, they are all covering your soil and they are all working under the ground together. You can also choose spring cover crops planted as soon as the ground thaws. And these crops establish quickly in cool season and the flower late in spring or early summer, when they can be easily killed and raked aside for direct seeding. Now, when we say killed and raked, you can only rake that area as a strip where you want to seed and put your crops in it. The basic mix would be sorghum Sudan and sun hemp. I'm sure many of you have heard about sun hemp, which has been in the past 15, 18 years. People have been in the northern area beyond North Carolina. They have been trying and testing the use of sun hemp. The sun hemp in our areas beyond, let's say, New York, they flower. And as you go upper towards the New England, you can grow them for a very short time, but they don't seed, and because of the day length and the short period. And so those that they are grown below North Carolina all the way to Florida, those that they grow and they make seeds. And so they could be, if you leave them as a cover crop and you don't collect the seeds, they could be a weed for you, another source of problem. But this thing can be really helpful to put these two. This is a legume, the sun hemp, and the Sudan grass is a grass, and both of them, they can help each other. One is giving the carbon and the other one is giving the nitrogen. And so these are powerhouses that they can work together. Even you can add to this mix, like we said, when we are saying diversification, we can add, these are, both of them have deep rooted, they are tap roots, but you can add the cowpeas, millet, buckwheat, because they have different timing when they flower. They also have different timing of how they vine and cover the soil. And so that would be a very good way to put them all together to diversify. All these cover crops planted early in the fall, these crops establish quickly in ecosystem, die back in the cold, and allowing early spring planting. These ones, they have basic mix, peas, oats, and forage radish. All these cannot take the overwinter, but they can be planted in a way that really helps the diversification as well as the work to prepare the soil for the springtime. You know, tillage radish, or some people call it the daikons. These are really used to break up the compaction and improve drainage. And not only that, they have an excellent task they can do, which we will talk about it in a few slides coming. These crops together really, if well planted in early September, they will winter kill, and then comes spring, they will be ready for you. Now, also you can add to the mix a barley, you can add fava bean, berseem clover, any type of clover, and also they will not survive the winter, but also they can be part of the mix to prepare for the next spring. Here is a taproot of a nodule where you could see the rhizobia bacteria growing there. And then here is your tillage radish, that it is there to break the compaction. And if it is mostly growing upward, meaning your soil has been compacted a lot, that's why it is growing upward rather than going downward. And so it is very important to know whether your soil, how bad it is. That could be one of your indicators you could use in a small area and see how it does. You can also make sure that you put the seeding rate pretty well on your seeder. And so this is one of the things that you can make sure whether you have too many seeds there, that you will not, for example, if you have not many, that they will grow and you will have in a row all those maybe you need to plant on that row, the tillage radish. But if you put them all in a big seeding rate, then they will not grow as much and they will not break that area that you need in between. Here is a mix of 3 types of legume and grasses. Here's another one, another method. Even though you are doing rye, we found that if even late in November, and we took that late in November, if you mix the drilling of that no-till drilling on the of the rye, and then you come back and you do over broadcast to close the gaps between the rows, you will see that there is no soil to look there. You will not see it because this method of splitting the seeding, rather than only doing drilling alone or broadcasting alone, the mixing is really good. That we did that at Rodal. Also, it is important that we know that it is important when to plant them, these cover crops, the cereal rye, and how far you can go. So if you plant them between 25 and October 15, you could see the growth, how it goes, and how it is really less and less as you go in the season. But sometimes we have crops that they do not harvest until late in the season, and we have to. But that will tell us like, okay, this is what you will get as a problem in April. That's how much biomass you are having there. But also we have found with another data for the cereal rye as a cover crop, the termination time. So if we have the dotted or the dashed, it is May 20th. If I would go all the way here, it is the May 20th terminating rolling crimping. But if I waited another 10 days, that's where it gives a big jump of biomass. It is like from 8,000 kilogram per hectare to 12. That's a lot. And that amount of increase in 10 days is very important. Even if you are late, it is really good to be late to have it. And also, it is very important that you don't roll crimp the rye when it is not ready. It has to have the flowering and reaching what we call the anthesis. You will see like the dust coming out, the pollen. And then when it is about at least 50% to 80% and not going into seeding where the seed, it is hard, but it is like milky. This is a great way you can roll it and it will stay, it will crimp, it will cut it. Especially if you have the roller crimper that we have at Rodal Institute with the chevron blades in it. It really will cut it, because if you do it earlier, that may come back and will be have to go again, and it may be shading the plants of the crops that you have there. So planning to go in transition to no-till, it really requires time, and you need to know that it is not today you think about it and tomorrow you start applying it. You have to have some considerations to the system and know what you need and how to, because as I said, it is an approach system. So meaning that you have to think ahead of time, probably 9 months ahead, thinking a year, how you are taking that plot that you want to start on it to be no-till for the first time, and what does it require from other resources that will make it successful. As I said, it may need some type of cover crops or certain management for the soil, or could be an equipment that you need to select there. So it is a change in mindset, philosophy, and practices. It doesn't happen overnight. No-till progresses through 4 stages. And these are stages that if you have been having your soil tilled all the time, you really need to think ahead. And that stage is to build your organic matter and have it resilient and making ready to the next step. It may take between 0 to 5 years just to get the soil to a stage where it starts regenerating its structure, because you want to invest in having more of the residues. You want to invest in having more microbial activity to work with the cover crops, and requires addition of nitrogen that comes from the sources that provide free nitrogen to those plants. The second stage is it is taking between 6 to 10 years after the first stage. And that starting, you are shifting here. You are shifting the whole, the biology. You are shifting even the physical properties of your soil. And that's where you are really making sure that you are building the aggregates in the soil. It is not a soil that, like it was intensively, intensively cultivated all the time, that it lost its aggregates, it lost all the connections and the channels. But once you are going on your 6 year to 10 years, like in the poll that we had people saying we have been doing over 4 to 6 years and more, this is what you should be expecting to see in your soil based on how it was before. The stage 3 is that after 11 years to 20 years, that's where you are solidifying and strengthening your soil. Here is that now your soil is ready for any issues that may happen, because you already accumulated the organic matter, you already incorporated more of the diversity in the soil. You are also helping in exchange capacity of the nutrients and cycling. So this is really very important. This means it is strong enough to keep going without additional things to come and adding to the soil. And the stage 4, it is when you have over 20 years, you are just there, that this soil is really having enough to take any of the problems that could be happening as a climate or a certain rain that comes that 5 inches in 1 hour. It will just pour and it will go through it rather than it will be eroded or going outside your farm. It will really help that your crops are really having a nutrient dense crops. Why? Because all the nutrients that are coming through the channels of that mycorrhizae and other bacteria that are providing the nitrogen and phosphorus and zinc and magnesium, and those ones, they are going all the way to your plants, and those are providing a nutrient dense crops. So this is how we can connect the information of nutrient density when we are producing crops by understanding where they are grown. And if you have been there in the keynote presentation, it's about how we use the system to organic regenerative system to improve the nutrient density. I would go quickly on that. We are rotating in the first 5 years the cash crops with cover crops, and then we are helping the soil to eliminate some of the weed bank and recycle better and break the cycles. That's where the first few years people would be struggling because they are still having the issues of all those pests and diseases and weeds. So it requires sometimes a tillage, but a very shallow tillage to help aeration of the soil. So we talked about that. We are facilitating the soil warming, especially warming. It is for no-till, especially is poor in poorly drained soil and short warm season. This is a challenge, but provide sufficient soil cover while at the same time achieving early season soil warming. It is very important. If we do a little bit of scratching at the time in spring, so it will allow a little bit of aeration and warming at the beginning. In the next, weed management is the same. It may be not clean of weeds, so we need to help the soil a little bit. As I said, you cannot go 100% probably at the beginning because it takes time, and we have to be very patient with the soil because it's used to be always attended to tillage all the time. So we can use different mixes of cover crops to smother the weeds. We can improve organic matter, and we can add also compost, which is really important, or composted manure, if it is not a compost coming from yard waste. So we are here helping the activity of the microbial, including the birds and the ground beetles and so forth. These are some of the earthworms that you may see there. So you are helping here to put more of the carbon in the soil than the conventional when we till all the carbon dioxide goes, the carbon into the atmosphere. In the next 6-10, as I said, we accumulate more of the organic. That's where we see the additions of organic matter. And so probably in the beginning, if it was like about 2% and you're expecting to add another 1%, it may take between 3 to 5. And then on the 6th year, you will see that change, that really. And we said that if we do it in a very short period, the applications of compost is really, because it is biological, is gonna really help with the crops, cover crops, to do a better job and faster to accumulate. And you might not need 5 years, but you may go faster in that way. You are building the aggregate stability there and providing more of the nutrients because you already established the the pipelines between the plants. And during this stage, no tillage, but possibly once every 5 years, just to do reset button, because sometimes we need some aeration, or if it is something really certain areas that are not doing good enough, we need to help them. The stage 3, we are increasing the carbon and the residues there. We are increasing the availability of water. And so when you have about over 10 years of no-till, anytime we go through drought, your plants, they will continue doing their job, because those pipelines are there, and those jobs of those mycorrhizae, they are going everywhere to get you the nutrients and water, and they will keep giving them. Maybe you will say, okay, well, where's the carbon, how they are growing? Well, there is carbon there is energy. But if you will be having a drought, they need a little bit of water, but there is drought. The water is already stored inside the micropores, inside the medium pores. Those are the ones that where the fungi can go through, and the roots, and give that water and continue until they get some water or some rain. So we are improving the cation exchange capacity and nutrient cycling. Here is one of the systems that if you have rain and you have no-till soil and till soil, this will show you that even if it is not on a slope, that the water is sitting on the surface for several days. Whereas when it is in no-till, you are improving the aeration and the water infiltration, and the water will go through it without causing any of stagnation of the water. Your organic matter will increase over time after that. You will see that you can go dramatically in changing in color in that area with the organic buildup. On the stage 4, you are really at your final stage. You can sit and relax and take vacation and just sit there and have your drink and enjoy the beauty of what you have done over the last 20 years, helping your environment, helping your ecosystem, helping the plants and the soil to revive again, regenerate the supply and demand, and making sure that the soil is going to continue like this into the next generations and people can use it. But let's say you had this and somebody comes and start tilling it again. The first flush of carbon that it will be going as carbon dioxide, it will be huge, because it is the first flush always that comes pretty quickly. You have a big buffer, you have a big capacity of organic, and then you are just going through that level of organic matter, and it will poof all the carbon dioxide. So you can break it, but it takes time to build it. So it is very important that we take time to build and keep that capacity, that currency, and keep that growing of the supply and demand. When you look at the soil itself, here is when you have a biomass already left on the soil. And if you take temperature with the one that has no cover there, you will see the big difference in the temperature. And that really, how many microorganisms would be living at that temperature 107? Maybe they are taking vacation at that time. They cannot continue doing it until the temperature changes with the climate or the weather. But here, your plants continue to grow and provide you with what you need, because you are already protecting the soil surface and providing moderation of the temperature. Here, results of the farming systems trial at Rodal Institute showing that the conventional till all the time versus the one that have been applied with organic is really providing more root system, more purification. It is having aggregate stability in it, more porous than this one over here. Also, there would be high levels of glomalin. The glomalin, it is the protein that it is in tied up with the sugars coming from the plant. We call it the glue. And so those are increasing in those soils that have more of that organic material, more of the soil biology community. Here, everyone, I am sure all of you have seen this, that the area where you have more organic matter in it, it is not subjected to degradation as fast as the one that has been very low and degraded from their tillage. So prerequisites must be met before implementing no-till. The no-till techniques requires the know-how and understanding the soil-plant interactions. So in all that, we need also to think about some equipment. So the equipment we need to use should be available and useful in a way that do not cause a lot of problems for us during this time. But some of those depends on the scale, that if we have a bigger area or a smaller area, or if we are small farms or bigger farms or medium size. So we need to think about the tools. Even sometimes there are areas where we can use animal powered devices rather than tractor devices or anything that is mechanically that depends on fossil fuel. Also, sometimes we can use manual ones that will show you some over here. Here is a person on a very small scale using a planter, a stick planter. Here they are doing the puncher, putting that in between, making a strip and putting the plants there. Or you are rolling injection, where you are rolling at the same time you are injecting. Another area where people I have seen in the north, they are using the wood, putting this in a system that really doesn't require much of the fossil fuel, although this would be an area where it is cut from the forest. But if that's already, let's say, a dead plant, a dead tree, they can take it and use it, and they can roll over the soil, and they can still use it even if you are growing. This is like in between going from this one to this one. Other ones we could use cultipacker, the stalk chopper, and flail mowers. These are ones that we can keep on the surface of the soil and keep the roots of the cover crop connected, rather than tilling it and not keeping the roots connected. Also, this is the one we have designed at Rodal Institute with the chevron blades. We have two different ones, and then when you roll, either you have a hairy vetch or you have a rye by itself or both, you can produce a mat like that in one path. Like I showed you on Monday, that you can seed your snap beans, or you can seed your corn, or any of winter squash even, and pumpkins, we did that. You roll it and you pass the monosome and seed it in one pass. That would be an amazing way to reduce how much you go around and impact your soil. Also, there are IJ manufacturers have done at a huge bigger scale, like 60 feet roller crimpers. And they also made very small that you can use on raised beds. So you have the cover crop there, you put the raised beds already from the fall, you put those things, you come back, you roll them, and you grow on that raised bed in the spring or summer. For people who have issues to get the bigger equipment into their area, they could use what we call the BCS, which is one person who can drive it. It's about 2 feet wide, and you also have chevron blades on it. You can use it. It takes time, but it is working also. We have tested it with the 10 feet roller crimper on the tractor, and both of them, they did the job by rolling and crimping the cover crop that was made of wheat, crimson clover, and hairy vetch. As I said, you can have about 30, 60 wide with the grain drills as well. At the same time, you can grain drill what you need. And also it is a scale neutral. You can go from big to small. Even here, a grower has a wood that she put there, or metal, sorry. She had a metal there, and she went and she pressed over in the greenhouse over the cover crop. You can find a way to do it. You have to find what it works for you, depends on the scale that you are growing. Implementing no-till, also here another at Care Center. This is where they show using sorghum Sudan at some point, and they use BCS sickle bar mower, and so they mowed over and let it sit that biomass on the soil itself. They didn't roll it. Other people in the north as well, here around Pennsylvania, they and in New York have started using tarping over the cover crop. So after rolling it, they put the tarp for a couple weeks, and then they remove the tarp later on, and then they go and plant into the mulch that they produced afterwards. Just to let you know that when you have mulch of that thick and you are growing plants that they require more heat, like tomatoes, they may struggle a little bit. Why? Because as I have shown you that the temperature is moderated and it would be cooler. And so these plants that they require warmth, they should be avoided in plants in areas like that. However, you, instead of keeping the whole biomass like this, you can do a strip tillage. You just do wherever you need to grow that plant there, and then it will be warming. The light will hit there and it will warm the area so they can produce more sugars and grow. But it is really good for plants that they require cooler air, cabbage and other ones, they are really good. Here is a system of multi-cropping and adding straw in between. You remember I told you it is totally different when you apply a straw on the surface than if you roll crimp or you mow the residue. The difference is the roots. The roots are already not here. You are just making a cover. You are putting a blanket, but you are not making sure that the root that makes the organic material is in the soil. Because we said that one part, which is very important to grow that organic matter, it requires the root to be there, that it will work with the microorganism. Here you are only putting this straw or that hay or whatever just around it to protect it from the sun toward the weed pressure. But you can put a lot of plants next to each other that they can help each other and produce as a multi-cropping. I am sure some of you have heard of Jan Hendrik crop in Germany, where he sent this photo and he said that he holds the what you call it, transfer the clover clay lace that he produced in one farm, and he put it on the other because he has not enough biomass. And so any area that requires an extra additions, so he keeps the cover crop there, but what if the biomass was not enough? He has a backup plan. He brings from another area and he put it over there. That way, it is like you are doing a broadcasting of the rye and you are seed drilling into the soil. So you are putting two of them together, which is really going to help you more to the biomass will be exploring. There would be microorganisms explore the ones that just cut or it is on the surface, and the other ones that they are in the root system, they are working with the root system. This is an excellent way to put both of them together, not only one or the other. Here is at Maine, Joel Miller having this farm. He is putting the tillage radish there, and this is when it is grown and it is covering the whole area. In fact, as I mentioned, it is not only used tillage radish to reduce the compaction because it is growing. The essence of it is that it has a long root that goes all the way down and picks all the nutrients along the way and keep it here. And so all the nutrients come and stay in that root that it is under the soil. And when it hits and it dies, just think all the nutrients are already there, ready for the next crop that you will have. The plant doesn't really need any amendment, the cash crop. It doesn't really need to explore, taking time to explore, because it is going to make all these holes for you. And so many people, they have used those holes in a row to grow their carrots or onion or any cash crop that is roots. So you can use this system to make it as bigger as you want, seeding rate big or small, and you can have more in between. And we have used this, we call it biological tillage. And we have done this work here at Rodale, where I had compared this system with all rolling crimping and using yeoman plow, where I have that area lifted a little bit to put the cucurbits or the tomatoes. And I used this system where I had strips. So when I put in the seeder, I put dividers, and I put cereal rye, and I made where it would be each of those tillage radish should be. And so what happened, the tillage radish grow and the cereal grow, and then hit the winter, they die, and they made a whole strip for me. I don't even need to get a strip tillage in that one. And they made it ready for me. And then I went and I put my cucurbits and I put my tomatoes, and it worked wonderfully. So what happens, I came back in this spring before I put my cash crop, I rolled, crimped, and it is ready, and it is the strip ready for me. So this is one way, or one of many ways people can come up with and use them. It is also, you can do that in the greenhouse as well. And you can put fava beans because they have nectars that they are really important for several of the beneficial insects to use. Yes, you can flail mower it. And also you can use no-till mulch planters here, where you have all these no-till, you can go over the material that has residue from before. Here's we did in the farming systems trial, we have soybean with rye in between. Here's in the corn as well, we did that. Here is another view where you have already the cover crop already degraded, and then you take the hand planter, which really doesn't require any fossil fuel. The bottom line is to improve your soil health, to use the right tools, to proper planting time of cover crops, rolling of the cover crop, amending the soil with compost is very important, because if you really need to mitigate the problem, it is one of the ways that you can make it as fast as you can, especially if you integrate all the other material in it and tools and equipment. The options are available, but it's up to you how to use them and how to make best of them. So you can use them to help putting beans, squash, cucumber, melon. You can do it very easily in a mulch that has rolling crimping. If you want to smash the plant to damage the stem only, knock it down, you can do that, and then the sunlight hit that area. The flail mower or no-till slicer planting can be used because with opening disc for spinach and beets can be smothered by heavy mulch. If you put those guys, the beets and spinach, in the area where you have too much rolling crimping, heavy biomass sitting on the surface, they will not survive. And that's it. I was going to give you those, but nothing. I'm gonna move forward quickly. These are the different systems I shared the other day with you. in brief, if we know that we are farming to improve carbon, organic matter, we can improve a lot of the structure, the diversity, and make the soil resilient to environmental stresses. And that's what we call regenerative organic farming, because as I mentioned, the more we put nutrients into the system, into the plant, the more we are harvesting nutrient dense crops, and we are helping the human health as well, the animal health. And with that, I really enjoy giving this workshop to you, and together we can work on having approaches that can work for our farms using agriculture, using regenerative organic agriculture, but also improving the soil organic matter as number one. Thank you.